Thanks, I'm genuinely delighted to be here today on behalf of Irish Rural Link. And for those of you who don't know us, I suppose the name is quite confusing to people because a lot of people think that we do the rural transport, and while we certainly do advocate for better infrastructure and transport in rural Ireland, we are a national network that were founded in 1991, and we're basically advocates and lobbyists on behalf of everything pertaining to rural Ireland. And what we do is, where we see gaps in the market, in particular at the moment, we try and come up with solutions. And I will say in Irish Rural Link, we pride ourselves in finding the solutions, and too often we hear a number of lobbyists and groups coming to the table with the problems. We all know the problems in rural Ireland, so we try and find solutions in innovative ways to try and address some of the deficits that are there. And I suppose one of the organisations that we work with, that's our mission statement. It's lovely and wonderful. We're looking for to have more vibrant, inclusive and sustainable rural communities. But in effect, I suppose, what does that mean? And over the years, as I said to you, we have tried to find solutions and programmes. We do a lot of European funded programmes as well, working with micro enterprise, trying to look at case studies. Too often people try to reinvent the wheel. So what we do is look at best practice across European countries, and we then replicate it in Ireland. And we work with 12 and 14 other countries and Erasmus programmes, in particular at the moment in terms of micro-enterprise, to see how we can help people help themselves. And where that's coming from as to why am I here today, I presume a lot of people might have looked and thought, what in God's name are Irish Rural Link going to bring to the table? But we have found over the years that there is a place for us in terms of community and engagement. And Justin might as well have sold Irish Link for me later on, because when RESS comes in and you're looking for a trusted intermediary, you're looking at her. You're looking at Irish Rural Link because we are that trusted intermediary, and we bring a lot of experience to the table in terms of working from a policy perspective to literally engaging with rural communities, and they do trust us to look at both sides and be the honest broker, and I will say we are that. And coming from that background, we have over the last number of years, I suppose when the crash came in 2008, the not-for-profit sector was hit no more than every other sector. And at one stage, the state would have given support to such organisations, and that was cut completely. So what you do, you find yourself in the commercial state, and we are actually at the moment tendering for contracts against top PR companies in the Dublins and the Londons of the world. But what we say to people, and we're very honest about it, when we go to the Air Grades Board in Mona, we're doing SAI work at the moment, is we don't do glossy brochures. I don't have a glossy brochure. I stuck my own slides together. I don't believe in bar charts, and you won't see any of that here. But what we do is we do real community engagement. We sit down with communities, we look at their interests in the area, and as Andy was saying earlier on, we listen to communities. We hear the communities, what they want. We know what the government want to give, we know what the organisation we're working for or the private company are trying to do, and we then try and meet a middle ground on keeping everybody happy. Not an easy task, and I put the turf up there when we spoke, and Judge Lafoy was right. We have to move away and move the conversation away from the over-reliance of fossil fuels. I'm born and bred Offaly woman. My summer was spent catching the turf that my father cut by sleigh, and that's showing my age until we moved to the machinery. But when you're brought up cutting and burning turf, it's a very emotive issue, and we spoke about it at lunchtime around the table. It's not just about moving to renewable energy. There's a passion, there's a tradition. It's like walking into your grandmother's home and smelling the fresh bacon and the brown bread. It's the same for anybody who's brought up, particularly in the Midlands and the country, when it comes to putting down that turf fire and smelling it in the winter. So when you walk in as an intermediary into a room of a number of people you know, and we're trying to tell them the benefits of moving away from fossil fuel towards clean energy, we were accused of selling our souls. We were accused of accepting the crown sovereign, the crown penny. So the negotiations are difficult, to say the least, but when we manage to bring communities towards accepting compensation for the turf cutting, I can honestly say that in the last number of years, I've met some men in their 70s and 80s that have come back and say, Jesus, if I'd known that years ago, I wouldn't have been cutting turf. What are we at? It's about education. It's about having real conversations with people and explaining the process of the transition. You can't do it overnight. Huge strides have been made in the wind industry over the last number of years, but I think we'd be foolish if we thought that the mindset has completely shifted. It really hasn't. And that's not to get work for IRL. We have work. It'll help if we get more. But there's a huge difference in real consultation versus sham consultation. And all of the contributors have spoken about that, and all of you that are in this industry know that. But I was a little bit alarmed when I heard of Justin's comment earlier on, and he's right, because of the uncertainty around the RESS. There's an onus on you to engage with the community, but if they don't take up that engagement, the 10% is there floating at the moment because of the uncertainty around where it goes. And Justin said, and he's right, what happens then? We hope that goes back into the process to bring down the cost. So straight away, an alarm bell in the back of my head rings, and I'm thinking, is that the mindset still? Do we not do proper community engagement in the hopes the 10% will come back to the industry? It might not happen. I'm the devil's advocate here. I'm the only controversial one on the stage, but that would be the fear, because we're back 10 paces if that happens. The only way that we can progress and bring wind industry to a level that we all want to see it in this country is through your community participation, through the ownership, through cooperatives, movements, and through genuine engagement. Now, I'd be foolish if we stood here and we thought that automatically every industry came to their own devices as we need to move from real consultation as opposed to sham. It didn't. It came on the back of a High Court judgment by Jeremy Sullivan in 2007, where Blair's government at the time were trying to bring in the nuclear power stations. And at the time, the judge said that the public consultation carried out before deciding on the power stations was inadequate and wrong. He went on to say it was seriously flawed and procedurally unfair, and that the consultation document gave every appearance of simply being an issue paper. And that has been the case for years in the country. And he finally said the information given to consultees was wholly insufficient for them to make an intelligent response. You couldn't argue with them. So that's where we are today, that everybody has made the shift towards certainly trying and doing our best to engage with the general public. But there's always going to be resistance. And, you know, from the electrification of the country in the 50s, people will always be resistant to change. But a lot of that is not, I agree at the moment, unfortunately, we have a lot of serial resistors and people who will oppose everything, but they're not the silent majority, and we have to remember that. Those that will shout the loudest at your public meeting might not necessarily, and quite often don't reflect the general public and the general population in their area. So a lot of the fear I found, and I suppose wearing my cap as a public representative, I was on both sides of the fence, and I suppose prior to that, I've a checkered past. I was PA to a government minister and his constituency advisor for 12 years before going into public life, then myself as a local representative. So I've gotten all sides of it, from sitting down with the policy makers, moving on to being the public representative on the bad end of it with the public, but also now moving into the community sector. And if I've learned anything out of all of that, and trust me, I've learned a lot certainly from my original life, but fear is the one overriding factor in communities. And it's not that they want to be resistant for the sake of being resistant, it's that people are genuinely fearful. And that no to wind turbines, if you drive through the Midlands at the moment, they're still on the trees and still on the gates at the moment. If you sat down with them at the kitchen table, it might be a different story. But they still have that fear factor. We've come a long way, but we certainly haven't properly overcome the fear factor. And really, the fear, as such, has come about through lack of experience, lack of genuine dialogue, but also lack of information. I chaired the Offaly Special Policy Committee, the planning and economic one, when the wind strategy was brought forward as part of the county development plan. And I was being fair. I was giving the facts and figures. I had our county development plan down. I was trying to explain to people what we were about, the needs for it, the benefits of the community, the development contributions that we could use towards services in the community. But over all of that, there were people sitting there with maps that had been handed out to them, and they were telling me, no, this company is coming into Offaly, here's the map, this is where the turbine is going. And it split and it divided companies. So before ever there was engagement with local authority members, with planners, these people who had no experience in community engagement had divided brothers, had divided townslands, and there was no point in trying to tell them at a community meeting, hold on a minute, look at your county development plan, that's an SAC. They're never going to get planning. They're outside of the boundaries that wind development is being considered. So the fear factor was there straight off. The damage had been done, and straight away you found yourself trying to, on the back foot, explain the indefensible from day one. And so from the very outset, and as Justin said, I'm delighted to hear that they're putting together a document in terms of good community engagement. But it's the misinformation that does the harm. And I put up that slide, and if I had that slide back in 2013 when I was trying to do the indefensible, I mean, noise factor was a huge thing, and all of the misinformation that was out in the general public at the time. And I'd say if you still talk to people, they'd say, oh, but the noise of those propellers, you know, are the health issues. And I've moved out of the country, I have a child with autism, and I moved down to the country to be away from that, and now these propellers are going to... It was the misinformation because people failed to provide the correct information day one. So it's hugely important, and Judge Lafoy said it as well, in terms of the type of documentation that's provided. People don't want glossy magazines. They don't want technical jargon. And it's not jargon to all of you because you're so passionate about the industry and you have that level of knowledge, but step back. Joe and Josie Soap don't have that level of knowledge. They don't have that technical ability. They don't need that technical ability. I can't even say technical, never mind, just explain it. But what they do need and what they do require is a ladybird version of a leaflet that allays their fears. And that's not been flippant about people's understanding in the general public. It's been realistic about every sector. Just give them the facts. Because when you go online at the moment, and I did so last night just to see how far we had moved on, one document here, and Justin, you're quoting, and you'd be delighted with that, but it was only 2016, resistant to wind turbines, and it's where the argument is going on about people's land and property being devalued. And the IWEA had your statement, in fairness, and I'm not going to say who's right or who's wrong, Justin, I don't have the facts or the figures, but my point being that if I'm Josie Soap and I'm looking at the internet to get my facts and figures before I make a decision or go to my public rep, the IWEA are saying one thing, it's not devalued. Then you have another professor from the London School of Economics, and he's saying that homes are devalued 5 to 6%. And then another expert in Germany in their chair of the energy economics and management in the university in Germany, and he's saying it's devalued by 10 to 17%. So you've got all these conflicting reports, and you then look only 2 weeks ago, and the same thing, Germany's wind industry, energy mess. As subsidies expire, thousands of turbines to close, and a picture of a burning turbine, and all of this melodramatic stuff that's out there confusing people. And the reason all of that is there is because a vacuum has been left and a gap has been left. And we can blame the government for that because we all worked in vacuum and doing county development plans at the time because the failure to regulate and the failure to bring in the guidelines. So while you create that vacuum, you're allowing others who want to put misinformation out there into that vacuum. And it's very difficult to try and change people's minds. Engage your community. We're all saying the same thing, and I know it sounds like a simple thing to do, but when I'm saying engage communities, it really does require local knowledge in each area because each community is different, people's needs are different, and the reaction you will get are different. So what I would be suggesting to people, if you're looking at a development in an area, be careful who you pick. And I'm not saying, this is not a pitch for IRL, I'm not saying that. Look at the players on the field, read your local papers, see what the public representatives are saying, see what the history of the area is. Is there a history of previous planning applications? Is there a strong player that people listen to? And let that be your trusted intermediary. It might be, look at your political groupings. At the end of the day, every county manager in the country is going to want wind development because they see the benefits to it economically and from climate change perspective. But at the end of the day, you need to bring your public representatives with you, whether you like them or not, because they're going to have the vote. So it's hugely important that you bring them in and educate them. And I'm not being facetious in that. I get away with saying that because I was one. But I know the level of cynicism that's out there as well about your public representatives. Like them or loathe them, you need them. But they too need to be armed with the right information if you want them to act as your trusted advocates on the ground with their constituents. So start there and start with your planner in the area before you go any further. The lessons learned, going to be very repetitive, but just listen to their concerns and their real fears. And listen, and when I say listen, it's not just sit down, what's wrong with you, Mary? Read the body language and read between the lines. Know what you're about. Provide the clarity and certainty. Again, when I go back to the guys rocking up into areas with maps showing turbines that were never going to be there, all you're doing is scaremongering. Sit down with your public reps, bring them one-to-one, not in groups, one-to-one. Talk to them, show them the benefits. Go to your forward planners in the local authority where you're applying for it, look at the maps, do your homework, and bring them on board before you ever walk into a community. Because the day you walk into your community, you're on the back foot if you haven't that homework done. Demonstrate what's in it for each person, and that's going back to our ownership and our cooperatives. At the end of the day, we all want to know what's in it for me, and I think that was part of the problem when you're doing your roads and you're doing your wind turbines. It wasn't so much opposition to the turbine, it was opposition to Johnny next door was offered money, why didn't you come to me? People want to know what's in it for themselves, and if you can let people be part of that, particularly when you're looking at lower energy costs, it's going to suit everybody. Make the status quo less appealing. We need to start on every level educating people of the benefits and what climate change is actually doing and the benefits to making that transition. And that's a national dialogue. It's certainly not one for today. Make people part of the story and slow down. Going back to the slow down, do your homework before ever you walk into a community, have the difficult work done and know what you're about. And finally, above all else, build trust. Because if you haven't people in the community that are trusted, you will never bring forward change. I hope I brought something after all of that to the play, but look at, just listen, build trust, and hope everybody gets whatever you want out of it. Garag Míle Maith.